is participating in the end of Ramadan prayers, is asking Nigerians to rededicate themselves to the noble teachings of the holy month. And the federal government says it was not taking foreigners, as the UK was not compelling Nigeria to take those who are not our citizens. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is today's edition of Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Wakimale right here in our Abuja studio, and happy Eid al-Fitr to all our Muslim viewers, wherever you may be watching. Congratulations to the very successful end to the holy month of Ramadan. Let's begin by letting you know that President Bola Tinubu is back in Nigeria and is headed to Lagos after his UK state visit. The president today joined Muslim faithful to mark the celebration of Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of Ramadan. President Bola Tinubu has congratulated the Muslim faithful in Nigeria, urging renewed commitment to the nation and humanity.
A philosophy, a doctrine of give, peace, security, and love of a nation, of neighbors, and kindness to all humanity in any way we can, giving assistance to the needy and helping the vulnerable. That is the teaching. The sacrifices that you've made, may God accept it. It is a question that we must continue, not because of the Ramadan has come and is over. We thank Almighty God for giving us that month. But the teaching must continue even after Ramadan. We must continue to be our brother's keeper, good behavior, good neighbors, love to humanity, and kindness to all of us.
All right, there you have it. President Bola Tinubu there earlier today at the Eid Praying Ground in Lagos. Well, so much for us to squeeze up and drain out of our conversation tonight, especially my guest tonight is a former Chief of Army Staff, and there's a lot to unpack with respect to the history of insurgency in Nigeria and the possible solution of how to end this cycle of killings and violence in our country. But that's going to be after we've served you with some of your political roundup stories.
Vice President Kashim Shettima is reassuring Nigerians that insecurity in the country will be contained through proactive measures deployed by both the federal and state government. The Vice President said this in Maiduguri, Borno State, where he joined thousands of worshippers to observe the Eid al-Fitr prayers. The Vice President also called for harmony amongst Nigerians to overcome the challenges confronting the nation.
My message to all Nigerians is a call for unity. It's a call for us to understand that what binds us together supersedes whatever that divides us.
And River State Governor Siminalayi Fubara has assured the Muslim community in the state of continued protection and peaceful coexistence. The governor gave the assurance when he received Muslim leaders who paid him an Eid al-Fitr visit at the government house in Port Harcourt as part of activities marking the 2026 celebration. Governor Fubara urged the Muslim community to equally strengthen internal mechanisms that will help regulate the conduct of their members, particularly in addressing issues such as herders and farmers' clashes. He assured that his administration has been working behind the scene to sustain peace and prevent escalation of security challenges. And the Deputy Senate President, Senator Barau Jibrin, has felicitated with Muslims across Nigeria on the successful completion of Ramadan as he advocates the need for Nigerians to support President Tinubu's administration amid global security challenges. Speaking in Abuja shortly after observing the Eid prayers, Senator Jibrin commended President Bola Tinubu for his efforts to stabilize the nation's economy through reforms and policy interventions and for tackling insecurity. He also expressed optimism that the president's directive for security chiefs to relocate to Maiduguri following the recent terrorist attack is a welcome development aimed at neutralizing criminal elements in the region.
We pray that may God, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help our country, unite our country, help Mr. President in what he's doing to reform the entire things in this country for the better, so that he could bring prosperity to our nation.
A political group in Ondo State canvassing support for the re-election of President Bola Tinubu, the Asuwaju Mandate Group, has held its stakeholders meeting aimed at mobilizing electorates at the grassroots. In attendance at the meeting are members of the Leaders Council, state executives, women's wing, as well as the local government coordinators. Addressing journalists at the event, the Director General of the group, Mr. Olumuyiwa Asagunla, notes that the group is now fully prepared and well equipped to mobilize support in all the wards of the state for the re-election of President Tinubu.
Thank you so much, everyone. The federal government is being clarified that the agreement is signed with the UK government only relates to Nigerians who do not have legal status to live and remain in the UK. It explained that the Nigerian government was not taking foreigners, as the UK was not compelling Nigeria to take those who are not our citizens. The Ministry of Interior today says, quote, for clarity, it's important to say that the agreement signed by the Minister of Interior, Olufunmi Ojo, during the state visit of President Bola Tinubu on behalf of the government of Nigeria and Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood on behalf of the UK government only relates to Nigerians who do not have legal status to live and remain in the UK. Well, the Nigerian security landscape is once again our focus tonight on the program, and is under intense scrutiny following a fresh wave of attacks across the northeast and northwest region, from insurgent ambushes to deadly bandit raids and a surge in kidnappings. Despite repeated assurances from the federal government and claims of military gains, questions persist about the resilience of terror groups, the effectiveness of current strategies, and whether the tide is truly waning. In a bid to stem the tide and respond to some of this, President Bola Tinubu directed service chiefs to relocate to Borno State, the epicenter of the insurgency, and a renewed push to confront the threat head-on. But with this change, the reality of on the ground, are Nigeria's security forces overstretched, and what must be done differently to end the cycle of violence? Joining me tonight, everyone, is a man who once led the war against insurgency, who has been at the forefront of leading the multinational joint task force. He led the Nigerian army. He's the retired chief of army staff, Lieutenant General Tuka Burute, who is live for us here in our studio. Thank you so much, General, and happy Eid al-Fitr to you.
Thank you. Happy Eid al-Fitr to all Nigerians.
Thank
to you as well.
It's good to see you.
Yeah,
thank you so
I'm
much.
Pleased to be here.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's get to it. And there are a lot of people say, cut the chase. What exactly is our problem in terms of fighting this insurgency? You, as a general, you did not only lead at the HQ here. You were right there in the center in the theater of war. You led troops and you fought and confronted these insurgents. But recently, there is few dynamics to the war. Does it look like Nigeria has lost momentum in the fight against insurgency?
Well, let me thank you once again for inviting me to be here. It's a privilege because I know PoliticsToday is one of your flagship programs that is well respected and well listened, not only nationally but globally. I just came back from the Middle East, and I've always tuned into the program. Thank God for the internet.
Yeah.
You can access, news live.
Everywhere.
So coming to the issue of this counterinsurgency, especially the Boko Haram incident in the northeast, as well as the northwest and part of the north central, is something that has historical antecedents, taken back probably to the 80s and then 90s and late 90s and so on, and then we now enter into the 21st century. It's really unfortunate that it has persisted. Well, I don't see that the insurgency is somehow overwhelming the troops. We're lucky, now we have more enablers in terms of the drones, both the ones that are armed as well as the ones for reconnaissance, and a lot of platforms have been injected. But the military still needs more of such platforms and the enablers. If you look at the landmass of the Northeast only, it's quite enormous. This is what we have always, even during our time, emphasized. If you look at it, the troops are so dispersed, and then the challenge of manpower, the equipment, all these things are challenges. If you see any attack, happening, on the troops, unfortunately, a lot of casualties of recent have been incurred. But I'm glad the recent Malumfatori incident, has really shown the capacity of the Nigerian military to turn things around, and they can do it. This set of service chiefs and then the generals within the headquarters, I've worked with them closely and I know their capacity. But we must understand one challenge, or the challenges of being in the fronts. It's not that easy. The issue of the terrain, the issue of even the weather, then in terms of even resupply and having troops to have some rest, fatigue, all those things are factors that militate against the troops' effectiveness, not the equipment only. So the human factor in terms of its ability to resist, the troop to resist, the elements, the weather elements and so on, contributes. But by and large, I have seen the assurances of the service chiefs, the chief of defense staff, as well as the chief of army staff. They've been to the northeast based on the directive of Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief. The Inspector General of Police was also there, and they've reassured Nigerians that they will handle the situation.
Yeah. I'm talking to someone who's had a varied experience. You've become a diplomat in Benin. You were General Officer commanding the 3rd Armored Division in Jos, part of the region of the country.
Who was? No, me, I wasn't. I didn't command 3D.
Oh, I thought you did in
3D. No. It's,
okay.
Yeah, I was at the MNJTF.
Okay, I know you were at the MNJTF.
Yeah.
My reference to some of your background and eventually becoming the Chief of Army Staff is to the effect that you understand the name and the nature of it. But what gives me worry is whether or not there are those who will say, when you were at the end of affairs, there are those who will think you had the opportunity to kill it off. Because we had the thought that technically we have defeated these guys, and you were just like a snake, cut the head off, cut the tail off, and leave it dead. What was it that you think technically did allow us to finally call it end of the game with these insurgents when you were in office?
Well, that's a very good point. And I've responded to this type of questions sometimes back. You see, once you allow insurgency to rear its ugly head in any country, all right, it's always difficult, very, very difficult to clear it within a specific time frame or a short time frame. I will give you an example. I was in Colombia. It took them over 40 years, almost 50 years, fighting insurgency in Colombia. The Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka, over 20, 30 years, they've been fighting insurgency. So it's a very complex nature of operation that it requires the totality of, the government, the military, the intelligence agencies, and the people. And it has generally been referred to as the people's war, actually. This insurgency is people's war. Because they are the ones, let me really emphasize what the CDS mentioned a few days ago. And to also correct, the misinformation that was given. I'm happy the CDS, clarified it. Mm-hmm. He wasn't talking political. If you look at the environment he spoke was in the Northeast, the Northeast operations. And if you look at where was he talking to, in which context, he was talking in the context of operations. So all what he said in the Northeast were operational, and it remains there. It wasn't political, and it wasn't, at the strategic level. If he had spoken about collaborators in Abuja, or he has specifically mentioned something in terms of political, then you can now read it in that context. But he spoke completely, based on the professional understanding at the operational level. So it wasn't political. Some section of the press took it as if he was inducting certain individuals within the region. All right?
So, it
yes.
brings me to this question. So when we said at the time that Boko Haram was technically defeated, what has happened since then?
Let me conclude, from the earlier questions, As I was saying, Colombia, Sri Lanka, it persisted for a long time. But we are not saying that it must be the same thing here in Nigeria. And we have this National Security Strategy 2019, and it's very clear. It has that provision for all of government approach in tackling the insecurity. And our focus has always been, looking at the army. That is the army that must do everything clear and disseminate and wipe out all the insurgents out of the country. Well, it's not like that. Just as I said, it is more or less the embedded problem that is within the society, and it requires everybody's effort. We have always mentioned that issue. Well, it will always be a wishful thinking, for one to say overnight, you will just clear this type of insurgency. These are people that have ideology, and believe that they have a mission, and once they establish it, they have a perfect society, which is not, realistic in this type of environment or this context, Nigerian context. So technical defeat, you see, if you look at it probably, clearly, 2014, 2015, early up to July, even up to some part of June, August, September, the spate of bombings, were so rampant on daily basis, from Maiduguri up to Abuja, But as of 2018, or late, end of 2016, when this thing was declared technically defeated and so on, you discover that all those things have stopped. and all those local governments that were hitherto under the Boko Haram insurgents were all recovered. So you see, there are certain things that are very clear. It has all those roadblocks across the country were all relaxed, and we never had that type of pre-2015 attacks. So by all standards, you say they've been technically
But are they technically
defeated.
regrouping? Are you worried about the manner in which they look like they are resurging?
You see, I have mentioned it, and I warned, at the time I was leaving office, time I was appointed ambassador, I warned, that this is a cankerworm, and it may persist much, much longer than we assume. I mean, we are thinking. It's very clear. And I didn't do it just out of, wishful thinking or, with any mindset in order, to get, attention to myself. No. Because I know, it's not just the military, it's not just the army's responsibility. It's not. This had always been emphasized. And I've mentioned it, the National Security Strategy 2019, spoke of the whole of society approach, in tackling this insecurity. We have done our own up to 2018, 19, 2019, 2021, and so on. And those that took over from me continued. But was this sustained? The military has always been there. They have not left those places. And today, if you go to certain parts of the northeast and even some part of the northwest, you see roads, accessibility to certain areas, ungoverned spaces.
What you wanted was that the military should stay put and conquer those spaces and not allow these guys to go.
No. This is development. When you say the whole of society approach, development, infrastructure.
They didn't follow through.
The government has to bring roads, rail, improve infrastructure, improve the social, amenities or facilities in those countries, employment, and so on. These are some of the all of society approach.
Is it too late to start working
It's not
on
late. It's not late.
So we need to go back to that whole of society
approach, yeah.
In ensuring that people get all of these amenities and be able to socio-economic issues.
Exactly.
But General, let me ask you, do you regret that when you were in office, you did not ensure the naming of the financiers of terror?
Well, you see, this is another issue. That's why we over-rely on the military. We over-rely on the army. Everybody has his own responsibility. All right? You can't say, I should be responsible to name the financiers of the terror. No.
But the military under you, on the army under you, said there are those, those people who are funding terror. The federal government of the day said they were going to name them.
They know who gave them that info. The government knows where the source came from. We have other agencies that are responsible.
But did you feel frustrated that those names were not mentioned?
Well, it's not a matter of mentioning the names. Action should be taken. Action should be taken.
And we see how these people work in the society today, and we know them.
Well, I think documents are there, and those agencies know whatever is happening.
Are there reasons why the names were not released?
No, you see, the issue is not a matter of naming names, okay? Names can be mentioned, all right? But what follows is what is
So they left them unprosecuted. They didn't go after them.
There are still some Boko Haram, detainees or people that have been arrested for several years. They are still not being prosecuted, So that is a challenge.
Yeah. You were heavily criticized, and those who do not believe in the rehabilitation, reintegration, there are those who believe that if these people have killed Nigerians, innocent people, they don't deserve a second chance. They deserve to be killed also. They deserve to be prosecuted. But that concept of rehabilitation, giving them uniform, feeding them with Nigeria's money, and these are people who were up in arms against the state, and they're being given a privileged opportunity. I mean,
you see, I take responsibility, for certain things that are strictly Nigerian Army responsibility. Okay, but even I don't want to say I'm disowning what transpired in the safe corridor, operations, it is a government directive, it's a government decision. It's not an army decision, all right, to rehabilitate, the repentant Boko Haram. The initial concept that we had was we gave them a timeline by which they must surrender. Between 2016 and, first part of 2016 and up to August or thereabout, we gave them a deadline by which they must surrender. And if they surrender, we assure them of free passage, and then we hand them over to the appropriate government agency to rehabilitate them. All right? That was our intention. But that deadline passed, and we say, okay, no more. As far as the army was concerned, as at that point, was involved directly in the kinetic operation to deal and degrade and also to clear, the insurgents. And we did that. I'm sure you see my commanders in the field. General Ezugu is here with me, and so many other General Adeosun and so on, General Blamabu. These are, officers that know what they are doing, and they did everything to degrade and deal with the Boko Haram insurgency. There are so many others, General, that I don't need to mention everybody. So at that point, government now took another agency, which I don't want to mention, continued with this, with what we initially wanted, to persuade them to come. But as far as the army was concerned, the deadline has passed. But after that, so the other factors, other interests came in. But unfortunately, they see it as if it is the army's responsibility.
But there are those who believe that measure was not effective.
Well, it has its own advantages and disadvantages, all right?
With the benefit of hindsight, do you think Nigeria should have entertained that kind of measure?
Well, to the point that the army, had their own strategy, all right? But after that, there are so many, gaps. All right? And logically, anybody that has committed such crime, he should be prosecuted. That's just a matter of to pick somebody from the bush or from the battleground and just give him, a uniform or give him dress and rehabilitate him. No, there are procedures, to deal with them. Yeah. So I think if there is, it may be reviewed, but the point is, it is not strictly, it's not army responsibility, but the army contributed to that because it's a directive.
Today, we are facing what has become more or less a complicated matter, and that those who say, look, going into the elections, we might be seeing more attacks. There are those who say, look, but the military and the army in specific, who are the ground troops on the ground fighting this war, they are not well equipped. They are not highly motivated. You've been there, you've done that, you've seen it all. If you were to advise the government of the day, what must we do immediately to turn the end of the tide?
Thank you. First of all, you rightly said, I've seen it all. There is no part of the Northeast, where the troops have been deployed, very few, that I have not visited. I have moved both day, at night, at dawn, evening, and at times we drive throughout the day and throughout the night, moving to ensure that we motivate our troops, we reassure them, and we replenish them, and we also ensure that the threats are, prevented. So I told you at the beginning, the terrain, the area is so vast, but we have very few troops. Very few.
So we need more numbers.
We need more troops.
What do you think is a reasonable amount of soldiers or troops that we need?
As at the time, I did my initial assessment. All right, we need not less than 5 divisions in that place, because there are some countries that are less than the Northeast size. They have over 10 or more divisions to deployed in their country.
So we need more bases.
More bases, more equipment, because of the vast nature of this.
Apart from the Malari, which is a major division, What other divisions do we have around the Northeast corridor?
And as at now, we have sectors. There are 3 sectors which are almost, division status. All right? Yeah, there are 3. In Monguno, in Damaturu, as well as in Maiduguri. But the one in Maiduguri is even larger than all the 2 combined in terms of land mass. So, look at from Maiduguri, you go up to, border with Yola, Adamawa, or even part of Adamawa is part of the division. And then you go down up to the north, Malamfatori and so on. They're all under one division.
Okay,
no, not Malamfatori,
but if you are making successes in the Timbuktu Triangle, create a base to hold it down, and within the Sambisa forest, create a base, hold it down,
but you see,
and dispel these guys almost on a permanent basis.
It's even more complicated now with the dispersal of troops or deployment of troops in the northwest and now in the north central.
So we are stretching.
Overstretched.
And these guys are now using more sophisticated
They're taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
They're taking advantage of that.
And they're using sophisticated weapons.
You see, that sophisticated weapon is relative, but they improvise mostly. They improvise, like the IEDs, and also they use the, motorcycle. Yeah, they have some limited drones and so on. And they use motorcycle to mount, machine guns or anti-aircraft guns on it. These are some of the criminal ingenuity that they apply, to take advantage of mobility and so on. But critically, apart from the government is as I said, the terrain is a big challenge, all right? The weather is a big challenge. All this can be overcome by a sort of, efforts, by the lower commanders, to be alert, to maintain vigilance, and these guys, once they lose surprise, that is the end. They can no longer fight. I think this is one key issue that I've always emphasized when I was there as the Chief of Army Staff, and that's why we don't give them space. We move all over, and ensure that the commanders.
General, if with the benefit of hindsight now, if you had your way, the one thing that you wish you could do to change the dynamics of this war, what would that be?
Well, first of all, which I did very well, was intelligence operation. Intelligence operation. And once we do that, we go into the, you may think it's not strictly military operations, but we have to do it, all right? You identify all those that enable them to move, to be resupplied, and to also gather information about our troops and pass it to them in the bush. So intelligence operation should be the key, We pick them in the towns, in the villages, in the motor parks to disconnect them. That is the first thing. I will give you an example. I mentioned my trip to Colombia. I had a very useful discussion with the Colombian Chief of Army Staff then. He said they developed the capacity to track and trace and arrest all their informants in Bogota, the capital, in the local governments, in the state, provincial capital, and so on. So they disconnected them from the cities, from the villages, from the towns, from the motor parks. So this is where all of society approach is important. And the other security agencies, the police, must also key into this to pick these people. Then, secondly, the capacity which the Army is developing now, the Defense Headquarters is developing as well. I believe the use of these enablers, the drone that are being used, which is very effective. So if these two are developed, which will be, I think, of
during your time, there are those who believe that the intelligence community was very uncoordinated, and there are those who say it's better now. And most of the service at that time were working in silos in isolation. The military was doing its own.
I think that's
that
is a perception.
I mean, that's a heavy criticism during your time as chief of army staff.
Yeah,
intelligence was there were no coordination. You guys were not really working together.
No, it's not that.
But those who think that things are better now.
No. It's not that we are not working together. There are challenges. Okay, there are challenges. A very big challenge. You know, certain things we don't need to mention it. Openly like this. But there are challenges. That is the truth. All right. And that's why I was able to develop the capacity of the Nigerian military intelligence, to be able to track, and arrest, those guys. We achieve a lot.
Are those challenges been surmounted? I will see those challenges now.
Well, yes, the challenges will continue to be there, okay? Because those capabilities, need to be maintained and sustained, and the equipments are needed to be regular. And so on. And are they sufficient? So you can't blame anybody. You can't blame the army or the navy or defense headquarters, but it must be sustained. That is the key.
Yeah. The challenges in the military is so much. They are embattled on all angles, a stretch thing. But when we do not have a coup, and I'm not sure in your as a military, as a soldier and an officer, I'm not sure how many times you've accepted coups ended in the last how many years. But we seen attempted coup recently, and they're saying this is a worrisome trend. Does it bother you that we are seeing this kind of trend in the Nigerian army? What does it portend for democracy?
Well, we have served almost 6 years, 5.5 years as Chief of Army Staff, and you see how we are able to defend democracy, how we are able to motivate troops throughout, all right? How to make sure that troops, officers and men, do not deviate. I had on several occasions had to caution them, and so forth, in order, for them to maintain focus on their professional line. And you must always engage the troops. You must engage them.
And make them happy.
Make them happy, and also make them, train and retrain, and operate as well. You see, during my time, there had never been any dull moment, from Crocodile Smile. Every quarter we have one engagement or the other, one operation or the other, So if certain is maintained, I'm sure there won't be anybody who will start contemplating.
Does it bother you that we are having attempted coup?
Well, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And so far from what the information from the public domain, the young officers, and from the initial signal that came from the defense headquarters, it says they were disgruntled because of loss of promotion and so on and so forth. So, but we are still yet to get the full, investigation details, and they've not yet to be, arraigned for any of this, so that we get the full gist, so that we know the position.
All right.
Yeah, but I believe the Nigerian Army is highly professional. They have remained apolitical for a long time, and anybody who feels that there will be a change, at any time, not now or even in the future, I think he's misplaced. The platform is open for him to join politics if he wants power, and so on. He can resign or retire,
General,
as the case may be.
Yeah. On a final note, I'd like to ask you, the president had made a decision, the service chief should go on the ground, and a lot of what's been said about how we need to finish this war, but those who say, look, we might be seeing more of these attacks as we approach the election. You as a general, one who has seen it all, like I said earlier, if there is one thing you have to say, not only to the troops, to the officers, to the commanders, and even to the government of the day, how do we as a people confront this war and win it once and for all? What do we need to do now?
Well, first of all, if you want to talk in generic terms, good governance. I think it solves everything, and not only at the federal level, at the local government level, state level, okay, and institutional levels. Good governance is all encompassing. Most of the challenges we have in this part of in the country generally, originate from the local governments and then to the states. There are certain, if I talk certain things, they will say as if I'm attacking individual or group or, certain people. But the point is, really, at the state level, they have a lot to do. I remember, during the, regional government period, the northern region and so on, the eastern region, the western region, the governments there, they are de facto head of states of those various regions. And they embark on so many developmental projects, establishing institutions, including medical, educational institutions, infrastructure, and so on, investing so much in the people. But unfortunately, for a long time, all those things have been, stopped. You don't see any cohesion within the states, where, the state authority has responsibility for everything that happens within the state and the people, taking care of their welfare and so on. And this is a major challenge. You must employ, create avenue for employment as well, where possible, employ the youth, the teeming youth that are roaming the streets, create opportunities for them, to strive, and contribute to the development of the state. So the states are key, in development. Yes, it's not the federal government. Even this insecurity, if the states really stand and do the right thing, the federal government, nobody will look towards the federal government.
All right. General Tuko Burutai, who is a former Chief of Army Staff, thanks so much indeed for your time. And I appreciate your time tonight.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
Up next on the program, is the APC heading into a credible national convention or a coronation already decided behind closed doors? Allegations of imposition is brewing controversy over possible tenure extension and deepening cracks within the ruling party. Plus, can the APC withstand mounting opposition pressure and still hold its ground ahead of 2027? We put the questions to APC Chieftain Cletus Obon. Don't go away, everyone. We'll be right back. Thanks so much and welcome back to the program tonight. The ruling APC is facing growing internal pressure as it moves forward a crucial national convention, one that could redefine its leadership structure ahead of the 2027 elections. Allegations of imposition, concerns over internal democracy, and speculations about a possible tenure extension for current party leaders and stirring tensions within the ranks of the party. At the same time, opposition parties are mounting sustained criticism while Nigerians grapple with economic hardship and persistent security challenges, raising a bigger question: can the APC maintain unity and public confidence going into the next election cycle? I'm being joined by a chieftain of the APC, Honorable Cletus Obon, who is live for us here in our studio. Thanks so much, and it's good to see you after such a long time. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. Now, what is going on in your party? There is agitation, and people are afraid that they will not allow them to participate. Some of them have bought forms, paid monies, but they are afraid that there's going to be some kind of coronation. That's what they call it.
No, I think those who are familiar, those who are doing this, are those who are just coming into the party. Those who know the tradition of the party will know that there's always a trajectory, and there's always a convention, a tradition in the party in which decisions are taken prior to this to prevent intra-party crisis. The intentment of that is to ensure that party leadership meets at all levels: zonal level, south-south, northeast, southeast, southwest. They meet at that level, then come and aggregate and congregate at the national level to agree at the caucus, national caucus level, and at the national executive committee meeting and the national working committee meeting, and then the leadership meets. Now, under that arrangement, whatever brushes, whatever disagreements, whatever issues that will arise and challenges anticipated are dealt with at that level. So what you get and what you're calling coronation is nothing but consensus. And that's why it has been not just institutionalized, it has now been legalized using the constitution of the party. Indeed, if you watch also a national electoral law, presently as it is, has also tried to, as much as possible, make internal party democracy not just compulsory but compulsive. The whole idea is to ensure that you create and bring down as much temperature.
But why are legacy members of the party angry that they have been denied opportunity for the elected position and forms to run for elected position at the National Convention?
Yes, that will come in some areas, for instance, where governors are just joining the party. Those who are legacy members are naturally and have been over the years. It is a continuous tradition that I think the national leadership, led by Ashwaju himself, who is very familiar with these complaints, must have to step in and firmly control it. Otherwise, there will be an implosion. Let me tell you one tradition that an average legacy member will not do. They are not going to jump camp. They will sit back there and face. You can impose your party leaders, you can impose your candidates, you won't impose the votes. Therefore, the president himself, who has gone through the opposition with this type of tendencies, is going to naturally come out. People like Baba Akonde, who was the pioneer interim chairman and became chairman later on. People like Adam Soshomole, who have been national chairman and been governors under this opposition, will definitely come and step in to ensure that we do not get the kind of crisis that is anticipated. Legacy members across the country are crying wolf. Presently, anybody buying form is not familiar with what should happen because positions, first of all, have to be zoned. Are we retaining them? For instance, the Northwest was keeping the senior presidency, vice deputy presidency, and the national chairman in Ganduje. Now that he's gone and it is in the North Center, will the position still be retained? Some members of the National Working Committee have been sitting there for 8 years mandatory as required by the Constitution of APC. If you keep them for another term, they'll be breaking the law. So are you still going to maintain them?
So what are you now asking the party to do?
First, sit back and look at those positions. For instance...
But the party says it has retained the zoning arrangement.
They can't retain it. The reason is because, let me take the South-South as a template. In our tradition in APC from ACN, you combine Edo Delta and give them a National Working Committee position. Bayelsa Rivers get a National Working Committee position, and Cross River Akwa Ibom gets one. In the present dispensation, in the last dispensation, the secretary in the case of Akwa Ibom Cross River was from Akwa Ibom. So when you bring a National Working Committee position, it comes to Cross River, which was the national woman leader held by Dr. Betta Edu. The second position was National Vice Chairman, which was for Bayelsa Rivers. It went to Victor Gedam, who is serving his second tenure in Rivers Bayelsa. And then Edo Delta were to take the National Publicity Secretary, which is Felix Moka, sitting there today. When Betta was appointed minister, Dr. Betta was appointed minister, that position ought to have a second nomination from Cross River. On the contrary, it went to Dr. Lele in Edo State. So Edo Delta now has National Publicity Secretary and National Woman Leader, while Cross River and Akwa Ibom are left without a position as we speak today in the National Working Committee. What that means is that in taking decisions about what should happen in the state, those two states will not have anybody to go and have a meeting with their people. Killing the position about equity and about presence of party.
So you're saying that going into the National Convention,
yes,
the party has made its stance known, retain the zoning arrangement, and they have given their position. But it's almost an impossibility that you are putting forward right now, because if the party said this is how we are going into it, and people are already gearing up because the convention is just next week. Are you saying the party is in a problem?
It is not cast in stone. These things have been done even on the floor of the National Convention. When these genuine concerns are raised, you cannot expect Akwa Ibom and Cross River to stay without a National Working Committee position, even the one that was zoned. The zoning of 2022 is what we are dealing with. It has not been consummated. And some people are being displaced by this singular action. And I'm very sure that people have not called attention to it because they imagine that it is sacrosanct that they said retain. What they mean by retain is the position for the South-South should remain there. Vice chairman is automatic for every zone. But the other positions like National Working Committee National Publicity Secretary, National Woman Leader, and the Vice Chairman are already sacrosanct. Deputy Treasurer, which was zoned to Edo State, and then, of course, Deputy Welfare Officer zoned to Cross River Akwa Ibom, which was in Akwa Ibom by Dr. Chris Akpan. He's the one holding that position. While Mrs. Osofo, Honorable Osifo is the Deputy National Treasurer in Edo State today, as we talk. That means that Edo and Delta have 3 positions, while Cross River Akwa Ibom has only 1 deputy position, which is Deputy Welfare Officer. So if you leave the thing as it is today, that means that inequity, inequality, and the very preaching of the Constitution, Article 20, Article 18, deals with the issue of equity, which is enshrined even in the Nigerian Constitution under Section 14 of the Nigerian Constitution, talking about equity of states and equality of regions and princes not being marginalized. So if you do not go back now and say, Cross River, take back your woman leader, or publicity secretary from Delta, return to Cross River, you can't keep the 2 there and keep another deputy position in Edo State. So you take 1. Right. Either woman leader returns to Cross River, or you bring publicity secretary to Cross River. So in that way, you are balancing the 3 equitable positions and aligned states of Delta, Edo, Bayelsa Rivers, and Cross River Akwa Ibom. To leave Cross River Akwa Ibom out of it is dangerous.
It's a big crisis, and I hope that your party will fix it before then. But thank you so much, Honorable Cletus Obon, for this time that you have spared for us. That's our show for tonight, everyone. Man, thanks for watching. I'm Sean Wakimale. God bless Nigeria.